What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late in the day on Tuesday afternoon. Heard from one Mr. Brian Gutekunst and Mr. Michael McCarthy. The Packers have practiced. It's all behind us now. Now it's time, that time of the day, for you and I to sit down and have a chat and talk about your Green Bay Packers. So as I am wont to do, I jump on Facebook and say good afternoon. See what's on your mind when it comes to the green and gold. After their final public practice, before they fly west to take on the Oakland Raiders on Friday. It would sure appear, now we don't have anything official on this, and we probably won't have for a day or two, but it sure would appear that one Aaron Rodgers will not be playing on Friday night, which would be I have to say, major break from normal operating procedure under Mike McCarthy when it comes to preseason. That third preseason game has traditionally been his featured game for a majority of his starters. But it sure sounds and feels and looks like that may not be the case this year. Aaron Rodgers running scout team, not taking first team reps in practice. It's to be determined. We'll see. But it sure would look like we've seen all we're going to see from Aaron Rodgers in the preseason. Now, that may change. That may end up not being the case, and Rodgers plays without any practice at all. Can't say that's unprecedented. But right now, it sure looks like one of the backups will take the first snap under center when they play Oakland Friday night. Sanjay kicks us off with a good question. Do we make a call to Jari Evans? I tend to doubt it, simply because most everyone was healthy and practicing today. Only 3 guys sat out practice today. Jake Kumerow, Trevor Davis, and Devontae Mays are the only 3 players that didn't partake in practice in some way, shape, or form this afternoon. That's about as healthy as you can possibly get at this point of training camp. If they were going to call Evans, I would think they would have done it by now, and B, I think they like the depth that they have. They like guys like Patrick, Pankey, Bell, etc. to pick up the slack, so to speak, while McCray is dealing with his calf injury. Although he did participate in individual work today, he did not do team stuff. Guys are going to get the start, I bet. I would guess along those lines as well. I would think Deshaun Kaiser would start on Friday night, but we're a ways away from that. Kaiser greater than Hundley right now? Matt, I'd say so, yes. Will Trevor Davis get cut? Even with missing all of this time, I think the odds are long, simply because he's loved on special teams, and Ron Zook absolutely loves him, and I think would go to bat for him and pound the table for him. Now, push comes to shove, you look at the numbers, it's hard to think that he's not, that he, amount of time that he has missed, it's really hard to think that he is going to have a spot on the roster. But like I said, Ron Zook loves the guy, and, having a coordinator go to bat for you could go a long way to keeping him around. Any updates on injuries? Gave a bit of one. Only 3 players set out practice today. In Devontae Mays and Trevor Davis, both who are dealing with a hamstring injury, and Jake Kumerow, still dealing with a shoulder injury from last Thursday night. Other than that, every Packer practiced, whether it was full or somewhat limited. Everybody was on the practice field, save for those 3 guys. So you have to look at that and say, that's about as healthy as the Packers have ever been going into a third preseason game, as far as I can remember. It's not often at this point in camp you've only got 3 guys sitting out. With McCarthy's comments, could they be setting up to carry 3 quarterbacks? Absolutely. I think it's a possibility. I think you have to let it play out. There's a lot of football left to be played, both on the practice field and in these 2 preseason games. I definitely think the door is open for it. I still maintain that would be a bit of a stretch. Myself, if I'm the GM, I cut the guy who doesn't win the backup spot, along with number 4, presuming that's Tim Boyle. Yes, there's a chance Boyle gets picked up on waivers. I tend to doubt that's going to happen. There's a good chance he ends up on the practice squad. But you never know. Maybe they end up shipping Hundley. Maybe someone flips a 7th-round pick for the guy. There's a lot to play out yet. But McCarthy did sound like, and he's a guy who wants to keep talented quarterbacks around, wants to help develop them. Gutekunst said as much in his press conference this morning. They want to keep talented players on the 53, the 63 really, with the practice squad. But there's a lot of evaluation between now and cut down day. we have a problem at running back with injuries, etc.? I don't think there's a problem. I think they needed to pick up bodies to get him through practice and preseason. But, Devontae Mays is still out with that hamstring injury. Other than that, Jamal Williams practiced today, said it's not a problem. Aaron Jones is back practicing, and Ty Montgomery seems to be taking full reps. So it doesn't look like it's an issue. I don't think they're going to push any of those guys in the preseason, and that's why they wanted to pick up all these other running backs. Name the third and fourth wide receiver. Whew, what a challenge. Well, the third is easy because that's Geronimo Allison. I don't think there's any doubt. It's Devontae Mays, Randall Cobb, and then Geronimo Allison opposite Adams on the perimeter. The fourth wide receiver is interesting. Obviously, the cop-out is to say it's Jimmy Graham because he is essentially the fourth wide receiver. But as far as wide receiver in name, it's funny. Without the injury, I probably would say Jake Kumaro. He's been the most productive and been the most consistent. But with his injury issue lingering, right now you'd probably have to say, Valdez-Scantling, I guess. But that could change day to day. There are days it looks like it's St. Brown. Sure hasn't looked like Jamon Moore for the most part during camp, but like I said, there's a long way to go yet. Tay Moore in the slot. He's deadly. Matt, I believe they will move him around quite a bit, much like you saw the progression with Jordy Nelson while he was in Green Bay. They'll definitely kick him inside to get him kind of free releases on occasion. But he's so good on the perimeter and so good at getting off the line of scrimmage on his own. I don't think they really need to do a lot of that. But I do think they will. That'll feature a little bit throughout the year. Thoughts on Beagle and the ceiling? I talked about that yesterday. Vince Beagle last year came into the league, obviously injured on his very first practice of the rookie camp, missed the entire offseason, and then was kind of thrown into the mix midway through the year without any kind of offseason. This is his first true NFL offseason, and you see him kind of swimming still a little bit on defense. Again, I said this yesterday, but around the league and some places, spots in Green Bay, he was considered, a special teams guy with fringe ability to step up and give you something from scrimmage. And I think that's what we've seen so far. And I think the Packers are hoping to get a little bit more than that. They're hoping for some more development from him. So far, you haven't seen too many flashes from scrimmage, but it's still very early in his development. And I know people want to label guys right away, but every guy's path is different. And right now, he's, like I said, shoring up a spot during his very first legit offseason because he missed everything last year. I do think he'll be, if not a significant contributor, I do think as the year goes on, you'll see him start to contribute more and more. Are they looking to extend Matthews? That was his words from at the locker yesterday when he spoke with reporters. He said that his agency and the guys upstairs, meaning the Packers personnel people, have had talks. You got to think it's going to be a while. I don't think anything gets done in Green Bay until Aaron Rodgers' contract gets done. That said, there's a possibility. I don't have any information on this, but there's a possibility they've talked and maybe the Packers tried to get him to, maybe extend a year or two to kind of reduce his cap hit. Maybe they asked him to take a pay cut. I don't know. Those are all possibilities, though. Definitely one of the targets going into this offseason when you looked at salaries and cap hits, guys you may want to take, trying to reduce that number. Clay Matthews would be on that list. So perhaps the Packers are trying to figure out ways to do that. Now, if that means extending him a little bit, a year or two, and decreasing that number in 2018, that may be something they're working on. We're just going to have to wait and see. Could the Packers trade for an edge rusher? They could. You mentioned Fowler and Shane Ray. I'd be very surprised if they went that route. I think they're going to stick with what they have. There's always a possibility they give up something. I know it was reported today the Jets had reached out to the Jaguars about Fowler. But, a guy like Reggie Gilbert, as a guy who's been around now, this is his third year. The Packers like this trajectory. They like to take guys, whether they're undrafted or late round picks or whatever, have them grow. And that's what they're doing with Vince Beagle. It's only his second year. Have them grow into their role. You're going to see a significant contribution, I think, from Reggie Gilbert this year. That's the way the Packers like it. Stick with your own guy, let him grow in your system, and he's going to contribute eventually. I don't think they're going to look for easy, quick fixes by giving up draft capital to do it. Maybe they go that way. Obviously, Gutekunst is a bit different than Ted Thompson. He's shown an ability to think a little bit more outside the box, maybe be a little bit more proactive, but I don't think it's going to be this great breakaway from the Packers' kind of decades-old MO of growing guys within their own system. Gilbert looks special. I don't know, Sean. I think he looks productive. I think he looks like an athlete. I'm very interested to see how he looks through an entire game against frontline competition. He's made a lot of hay against backups. But hey, you can only beat the guys across from you. You can only win the battles that are presented to you. And he has done that on a consistent basis since camp started. So I think it's promising. I'm not ready to jump to special, but you definitely see the potential there. Will Devin Hester get in the Hall of Fame? Random question of the day. I believe so. I think he was a complete difference maker, especially on a Bears team that didn't have a whole lot of them. He was best at what he did for a good stretch of time, and that's kind of what the Hall of Fame's all about, isn't it? John Ryan, punter, still available, James. Yes, he was granted his release by the Seahawks yesterday because they have a punter that they drafted, who was incidentally drafted, I believe, 23 picks before the Packers drafted their own punter. The Packers aren't going to go turn around now and go get a guy in free agency, who they cut years ago, obviously, when they drafted their own punter. I know J.K. Scott's numbers in games haven't really measured up to what the rookie in Seattle has done so far in preseason, but they certainly have on the practice field, and you have to think it's only a matter of time until that production translates over to preseason games. I think, they used a 5th-round pick on a punter. They're going to give that kid every opportunity to have that job throughout the year until they determine that he just can't do it, and there are no signs of that just yet. Why not bring in a proven safety? Hey, I would, but I don't run the Packers. I've stated often on Twitter I would bring in Eric Reed. I would have brought him in earlier this offseason. I think he's better than anything they have opposite Clinton Dix. But as I was just stating in regards to the Packers and their MO and wanting to grow their own guys, that's what they've done, and that's what they continue to do. They like Bryce. They like Whitehead a lot. And clearly they drafted Josh Jones. So they're going to let that mix kind of try and solve that problem. Or they don't even probably see it as a problem, but solve that competition opposite Clinton Dix. Devontae Mays make the roster until Jones returns. Not if he continues to sit out with this hamstring injury. It's going to be really tough for him to make it. Who's the receiver least likely to make the roster? I got to admit, I would say Trevor Davis. I know, like I said earlier, that I think Ron Zook's going to go to bat for him. I don't know if that's enough for him to save his gig, though. He's done nothing all camp, and whether that's prior to the injury or since the injury. Yes, you know what he can do as far as you've seen him return punts all year long last year. You know what he brings from scrimmage, which is limited, but he's got speed and he can help you there. But he's done absolutely nothing this summer. So you got to think, as far as looking at the rookies and Jake Kumaro in the mix, it's hard to find a spot for Trevor Davis. Reed is a cancer. If you're going to besmirch the man's name, you may want to spell it correctly. Call me old-fashioned. Reggie Gilbert over 10 sacks, over, under. I'm going to take the under, Marcus, if only because I don't think he's going to be on the field quite enough to get 10. Do we bring in a veteran running back? No. They brought in a couple running backs this week. That's what you're going to get. Am I comfortable with the Packers running back situation? Sure. This is how they've always done it. I remember when they won the Super Bowl, everyone was ready, gearing up for the trade for Marshawn Lynch, and they ended up going with, I can't remember who it was, somebody off the Atlanta practice squad. It's just how they've always gone when it comes to the position. The one time they've kind of broken away from that in regards to positional value is when they used a second-round pick on Eddie Lacy, and that was simply because they thought the value was too good to ignore. They had him rated as a lower first-round choice. He fell into the late second, and they thought the value was too good to pass up, so they selected him. Obviously, Brandon Jackson is another guy that they selected in the second round, but outside of those two instances, most of the time they have really, gone on the cheap, so to speak, when it comes to running back. And for the most part, I think, that their offense is built around their quarterback so much. It tells you something that to get on the field in this offense, your number one trait has to be your ability in pass protection. And that's why Jamal Williams was up before anybody else last year, and why he's still number one this year. It's because he protects the quarterback better than anybody else. Would it be great to have a Dalvin Cook type? Yeah, probably. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers would love it. But they have just deemed, for whatever reason, they have looked at the numbers and probably looked at the injury histories of running backs throughout the league, look no further than the rookie class this year. It's a position that takes a ton of punishment, deals with a lot of injuries, down in and down out. I think they just don't feel like it's a wise investment to invest heavily at the position. What's the answer for the hole at middle linebacker? I think it's been Oren Burks. I think he's very clearly the next man up. You've seen, obviously, the value Martinez has brought all throughout last season. Beginning of this year, my colleague Tom Silverstein just had a great piece up at PackersNews.com. If you didn't see it, make sure you find it. About Martinez and his development and his importance in the defense. But next to him, I would have suspected that they would have brought Burks along a little more slowly had Jake Ryan not gotten hurt. But it's all speed ahead now. Burks has been on the field a whole lot, and you've seen a lot of him in the preseason. And I think that's going to continue. They're going to live with whatever rookie mistakes he's going to make. But yeah, they're all in on Burks. Raiders are not negotiating. That is correct. Have the Packers done enough to support Rodgers with the rest of the roster? Well, we'll find out, won't we? I tend to think so. The only major part of the roster I would address at this point that I think there are obvious upgrades for is safety, is the starting strong safety opposite HaHa Clinton-Dix. And as I said earlier in the video, I would go sign Eric Reed. He's better than anything they have on offer. I think that's clear if you look at the tape. But, for the most part, they've shored up most of the positions. I think, the cornerback position has really turned around. There's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of depth along the defensive line. A lot of the problem areas have seemed to be, if not turned around, at least on the way. They're in the throes of being turned around. So we'll see. I mean, Rodgers said on the radio today, they are young at wide receiver. There's no doubt about that. But between Adams, Cobb, and Jimmy Graham, and Mercedes Lewis, I think they've got more than enough firepower to do, the damage they need to do on offense. Kenny Clark will make life a whole lot easier for Burks. Matt, yes, he will. All right, everybody, I'm going to take one or two more. Will we keep 3 tight ends, and do the Packers... I'm sorry, I missed the second part. It went too fast. But yes, I think they will keep 3 tight ends. I do think the one candidate that maybe could fall under the possible surprise cut category would be Kendricks. Just because he's slated to make a little bit more than you probably would want to be paying your third tight end. But I do think they end up keeping him. And I think those Graham, Lewis, Kendricks, those will be your 3. Over/under on games played by Clay Matthews this season. I'm going to set it at 10, and I'm going to take the over. I feel a good year coming on for Clay. It's a contract year. He wants to ball out and get one last payday, and I think it's going to happen. All right, everybody. I'm going to take off. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest from today's practice and everything regarding the Green Bay Packers, barring any breaking news overnight. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Thanks a lot, everyone.